Hi everyone, and welcome to this A-level video on how to structure your AO1 essays. AO1 essays are all about explanation. When you see AO1, you're always thinking, okay, explain. This is not an argument. It's not trying to prove a point. It is an explanation of one of the topics that we have done. AO1 essays will always start with the term examine. So the one we are going to look at today is examine the religious experience of visions. So how do you structure these essays? So we use the term PIES to help you consider what to put in every paragraph. So PIES stands for point, information, explanation, and scholars. Scholars includes key thinkers that we use, some of their quotes, and you can also include biblical quotes within that section. So what we're going to do in this video is look through this example essay so you can see how PIES works and what you should be aiming for in an AO1 essay. So the first thing that you need in every AO1 essay is an introduction. So if we look at this introduction, you can see what you should include. So firstly, we start by talking about religious experience in general and about how Swinburne describes different religious experiences. One of these forms of religious experience is visions. Then we give the definition to visions. You'll notice that it's really short. A connection with God that teaches or reminds the individual of something about God. And then we mention another scholar. So we talk about St. Augustine's view of visions and how he separates them into three categories: corporeal, imaginative, and intellectual. And there we have our three different headings for our paragraphs. So as you can see, this is quite straightforward. It's not long, but in it, we've got two key thinkers, we've got a clear definition of what visions are, and we have the structure of our essay. So if I'm reading that as an examiner, it makes sense. Straight away, I know where you're going with this essay. Remember, I've said this before, but in an AO1 essay, your examiner does not want surprises. They don't want to get to the end of the essay and for you to go in a totally different direction. Okay? So tell them exactly what you're going to put in every paragraph. I've marked some of these essays that students have done, and some of you have actually went into describing these categories in your introduction. You don't need to do that. You have a paragraph on each of them in the essay. So say what they are, but you don't need to start explaining them in your introduction. Okay, now let's look at paragraph 1. So firstly, corporeal visions are one form of visions. That is your point. I'm going to highlight some things here so they make sense to you as you look at this. But that's your point. That's all you need. You don't need to start explaining lots in your point. Your point should be your first sentence, and it should tell the reader exactly what that paragraph is all about. And then after that, we see a mixture of the other things in PIES. So you will remember that at GCSE, you followed PEAL structure, so point, evidence, explanation, link, and you generally did that in that order in every single paragraph. With A-level, it's slightly different. I don't mind which order you put these things into the paragraph in, but it's more of a checklist for you. So you can, at the end of a paragraph, you can think, okay, have I added extra information? Have I explained what I'm trying to say? And is there reference to scholars or biblical quotes in my paragraphs? Okay, so don't use it so much as a this has to be done in this order, more of a checklist. So here we can see that straight away we know corporeal visions, that's what this paragraph is about. Then it explains what they are. So down to here, we see information about what corporeal visions are. We see some of that explained. That's important. We need to know what it is before we look at examples. And then here we have two examples of corporeal visions. What I want you to notice here is that it doesn't just state the example and move on. It gives the example, but then it links it back to how it is an example of a corporeal vision. So, for example, Joan of Arc experienced visions of angels and saints along with voices who instructed her to carry out actions. That's great, but then it needs to be linked back to what the paragraph is about. Next line, this is a clear example of a vision through sense experience of sight and hearing. Okay, so as I've read and marked essays that students have done, this is what people have failed to do. So they've explained the example, they've given the example, what happened, but they haven't linked it back to the type of vision that it is. So remember, always link it back to the type of vision that you are talking about. Why is your example there? Okay, so that is paragraph 1. I know some of you are thinking, where's the scholar? Where's the quote? Because we talk about it a lot. I agree. I think that could really help this paragraph. But we do have a lot of specific information in it, and we are going to have references to biblical quotes and other quotes as we move on down the essay. So take this as an example. If you're writing an essay in an exam and you just can't remember a quote, don't panic, okay? It's an overall view of the essay. You're not going to lose 2 grades because you don't know one quote in one paragraph, okay? Let's move on to paragraph 2. So Augustine's second form of vision is imaginative visions. Again, this is our clear point. If I'm reading this, I'm thinking, this is great. I know exactly what they're talking about here. Remember, the clarity of your writing is so important. If it's easier for someone to read, you will do better. This is different to corporeal visions as they do not rely on sense experience, but usually occur in the eye of the mind. So here we have some information, a bit of explanation about what this type of vision is. And notice that it links back to the paragraph above, which just makes the whole essay flow so much better. It makes everything make sense. And then again, we go into the examples. So we talk about 2 biblical stories here. One is Pharaoh's dream and the other is Joseph's dream. Notice the reference to the exact chapter in the Bible where it's found. At GCSE, that wasn't such a big deal, but at A level, that's really important. It just shows that you know what you're talking about. Okay, you don't need to quote verses and verses, but being able to reference exactly where it's found is really important. And similarly to the paragraph above, we see that what the writer does here is they don't just give you the example, but they explain how the vision is imaginative. So they say Pharaoh's dream is imaginative as he's no control. He sees it in a dream rather than with his physical eyesight. Okay, so straight away we see we're not just given the example, but we are explaining how it is imaginative. Look at the last line as well. Therefore, imaginative visions allow people to experience God, but in a less active role than corporeal visions. So again, linking it back to the paragraph above. So this whole thing makes sense. We're not evaluating, we're not arguing between them, but you can see that this all clearly links. And then we go on to the final paragraph. Finally, intellectual visions are Augustine's final form of vision. Again, so clear. I know exactly what this paragraph is all about. This form of vision is particularly different to the other 2 as the vision has no image. There's quite a long piece of explanation, information about this type of vision, mainly because it's more complicated than the other 2. So the writer here gives us a little bit more. They also use the information that we already know to explain it. So if we look at this line here, it says, while the previous visions could be called vision through sight and the eye of the mind, this vision could be called an illumination of the soul. I really like that because it's using what you've already explained to explain this new point. Then they also go on to give an example. And in this example, they give 2 quotes which really explain what we're talking about. So an example of this vision is the story of Spanish mystic St. Teresa of Avila, who experienced an illuminative vision of Christ, stating, I saw nothing the eyes of a boy, nothing with the eyes of the soul. Clearly highlighting that it was not corporeal or an imaginative vision. She also stated that she felt his presence. Notice with these quotes, they actually reveal new information. I think at GCSE, we were really good at putting in quotes, but at times it was because we knew we had to put a quote in. So we just found one that was vaguely relevant and put it in. With this, really try to make sure your quotes are adding something. Okay, no one is just looking at this, giving you a tick for a quote. It has to be relevant, it has to add something. In this paragraph, these quotes really explain what an illuminative vision is. They're really important. Okay, so as you can see, final thoughts from this are this pie structure is not a work through it one by one and tick it off. Okay, this is a checklist of things that you should be putting in your paragraphs. With essays that I've marked before, the big problem is that people aren't including enough specific detail. So when I say information, I mean specific information. Use key terms, key scholars, names. Show the examiner that you know what you're talking about. If it is vague, you're not going to get more than 5 out of 10. Okay? You need to make sure you're explaining the specific details of these things. And how you decide what is in the 3 paragraphs. With visions is an easy one because there are 3 types of visions. So it works really nicely in terms of structure. For some of the others, you need to decide what you're going to put in your 3 paragraphs. And I've said to you before, with AO1s, there should be no surprises. Everyone should go into an exam and be able to do really well in all of your AO1 essays because you know the main topics. So what I would do is I would choose your 3 main points for every topic we have studied. So if design argument comes up, you know what your 3 points are. Situation ethics comes up, you know what your 3 points are. Okay? So for some of you, that will mean you actually need to go and sit down and work that out so that you're not spending time in an exam doing that. Right? As we said, for some of them, like visions, that's really easy. For some of them, it's a bit trickier, but it's worth doing before so that you don't lose marks. Everyone should be aiming for at least 8 out of 10 in all your AO1 essays. You can just learn all this information. Okay? So now you will have some tasks to do on this AO1 structure. Thank you for watching this video.